Welcome back to Comic Book History, episode 98. Here are viewing the highlights of our comics from 2008 to 2010. Basically, in my opinion, 3 really good years for our comics. Though 9, there's a very interesting weird thing I know about recently about that particular year. In 2008, this particular year is noteworthy for several different things. Number 1, it is the start of Matt Fraction's run on basically Iron Man. It started a 4-year run in the title, which will conclude in 2012. Let's see. Basically, the big thing with 2008. Also, this was the start. Before I talk about some big events that happened in the year. Also, we have the start of the cult classic, a run for a particular book that's. If anybody get a chance to read this book, read it. It is really good. This 25-issue book is amazing. It's a shame the book ended this volume ended in 2010. This being Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, written by Dan Abnett and Andy Lanning, who wrote the whole book. 08 was the start of this particular thing. Let's see. Let's see. Also, I believe that despite the 3-monthly thing, we do occasionally have the Spider-Man Extra. We have the Spider-Man Family, Amazing Spider-Man Family, basically anthology books published alongside Spider-Man. Dropped this period of time. I mean, in the case of 08, was there anything really noteworthy happening in 08? When it comes to Amazing Spider-Man, is there big storylines in 08? Well, there was the Jackpot stuff. Yes, the Jackpot stuff, believe it or not. Yes, though this particular Jackpot is, also, I forgot to mention this. They had this weird thing where, post One More Day, where the Daily Bugle got bought out by this guy called Daniel Bennett, who decided to rename it to the DB. Yes, the DB. Okay, so if I can find. Okay, so the writers for post One More Day were these people: Mark Guggenheim, Zeb Wells, Bob Gale, Dan Slott. There's more about that later. Though I had some Mark Waid stuff, but in the case of basically excuse me. Just Dan Slott, Bob Gale, Mark Guggenheim, and Zeb Wells. Though in a way, basically, so in the case of, let's see if I can find it here. So, here we go. So, aside from the whole Brand New Day stuff, we also had, the debut of Mr. Negative. Yes, a villain who, how should I put this? It's a villain that Dan Slott loves to write this guy. He is by far Dan Slott's favorite character to write, who's not Dr. Octopus. Yes, I am not kidding about that. This guy has appeared a lot over the years. As recent as the Spider-Boy title that came out this year. Yeah, there was also Kraven's First Hunt, which debuted Kraven's daughter. Yes, his daughter. There was also various different storylines, there was also Anti-Venom, New Ways to Die, which is Marvel taking on the Thunderbolts. Lots of really big stuff happening in this book in 08. Let's see. In the case of New Avengers, that book was dominated by the big events of that very year. I'm going to get to that. Matter of fact, there were 2 crossovers in 2008. You're like, really? There were 2 crossovers in 2008? Yeah. Believe it or not, there were 2. So, the 2 crossovers that dominated the year of 2008 were Actually, it was like one. Let's see, because I remember basically... Yeah, it was actually one. Because I remember there was this checklist that was released this one. That this dominated most of the year of 2008. Starting mostly in April. It was the event that's since been very mixed. I remember reading at the time, I enjoyed this event. This event being Secret Invasion. Yep, an event that's not as divisive as Civil War. The only problem with it was the fact there was way too many tie-ins. I mean, they practically threw in the entire Marvel Universe. Also forgot to mention this. In 2008, aside from this, we had the launch of the Hulk title by Jeff Lowe, artwork by Ed McGuinness, and had a debut of a very popular character who since made his live-action debut this year, that being the Red Hulk, aka, well, this is real a couple years later, it was actually Thunderbolt Ross. But at the time, basically, it was a mystery. OA also launched the Chris Jones, Craig Kyle, Clayton Crane X-Force series. X Factor, which was launched in 2005, that was still going really strong in 2008. Like, really strong. Let's see. By the way, I also forgot to mention last time, Wolverine, after House of M, launched his second ever spinoff, his first ever spinoff ongoing series, Wolverine Origins, written by Daniel Way. Most of the book, anyway, is written by him, though later half of the book was written by somebody else. But the first 25 issues of the book were drawn by Steve McNiven. The two most notorious things about this book was the fact it debuted Wolverine's son, Daken. Also, it brought back the character Nuke from Daredevil Born Again, and also has a brief team with Deadpool. Yep. And of course, basically, this would lead now. Secret Invasion was a storyline that practically took up a lot of Marvel Comics. And here's something really interesting, though. Amazing Spider-Man did not have the series tie into this particular crossover. Nope, it did for Civil War 1, but not for Secret Invasion. Nope. Yeah, that was taken out of it. Basically, Amazing Spider-Man had a tie-in miniseries, so did Thor and X-Men. These three all had tie-ins to it. Iron Man did, kind of. It was the last three issues of Volume 4, when it was retitled, so if it could still call it Iron Man, though for some reason when they renumbered the 500, they didn't count this issue, but later on they did. When the book was briefly retitled to War Machine Weapon of S.H.I.E.L.D., where it became a War Machine title. And in case you're going to be asking, Nick, did Captain America have a title? No, he did not. Also, Deadpool got his brand new solo book. First, because they ended Cable Deadpool prior to this. So Deadpool got his first solo book, first time since 2002. And this book managed to last for a shocking 63 issues. Yeah, it was actually a bit shorter than the previous volume, but damn good book. The whole book written by Danny Way. They also launched the short-lived Catherine and My 13 book, which I believe Paul Cornell wrote this book. It was a replacement for New Excalibur, because of course they canceled that book and relaunched with this one. Let's see. Oh yeah, almost forgot. Another thing I forgot to mention was after Annihilation, we basically brought in Nova having another solo book, which was launched in 2007, and was launched in between Annihilation and Annihilation Conquest, and it had tie-in to that, and plus the Initiative. The book managed to last for a shocking 36 issues, which made it the longest volume of the entire series, and the volumes that came after this volume never last that long. I don't know exactly what the reason was, per se. Last volume, I think, was probably canceled due to low sales, but the last couple times, I don't really know what it was. But the whole book, all 36 issues, written by Dan Abnett and Andy Lanning, who also wrote the Guardians title. Secret Invasion was the whole thing of like, oh, people were kind of be Skrulls. Thanks to this crossover, he actually brought back Mockingbird, which stuff really dark green with her. Let's see. Also, I'm trying to, let's see here. Because I think '08 was Divided We Stand. I believe this was the crossover that came out. Yeah, it was in '08. Yeah, this is a side storyline. Now, one thing I should mention here, Claremont left Uncanny X-Men. I believe it was for his second run for the book. Actually, it was his third run. His second run is not very memorable for a lot of people. Not really. Let's see if I can find it here. Okay, here we go. So he left after issue 473, and I believe Ed Brubaker took over the title for a couple of years, and then it was taken over by Matt Fraction with issue 500. Yep, 500. Yeah, 500. Believe it or not. Yeah, basically it was a very brief storyline. We also had the start of a brief spin-off book, Young X-Men. X-Men Volume 2 was retitled X-Men Legacy, which was a title it maintained for the remainder of that book's existence before it ended. Wolverine has storyline we fought Mystique. Let's see. We also have a story called... Basically, X-Men Legacy was a very interesting title per se, because while it was known as this particular name, it had several different eras of the book. The first era after Messiah Complex, because the book was still mostly put a... how should I put this? It was mostly put still a roster handle per se. Because, of course, after the events of House of M, we had Blood Apocalypse. Now, when my character took over the title, these were the members. Cannonball, Cable, Iceman, Lady Mastermind, Mystique, Omega Sentinel, Rogue, and Sabretooth. And their base operations was not the Xavier Institute. Oh no, it was a freaking oil tanker that could basically fly in the sky. And at the Messiah Complex, throughout almost the entirety of 2008, we had the book taken over by Professor Xavier until around issue 225. And then basically became other stuff per se. But after we had Divided We Stand, which was the X-Men disbanded and then reforming. As a matter of fact, Nightcrawler had a series, which is going to be called Nightcrawler Quitting Time, but they canceled the book. Yeah. And also, during this period of time, they built up a big crossover in 2009, known as War of Kings. Another really good crossover written by Dan Abbott and Annie Lenning. This was actually the second crossover they worked on. Yeah, which was a storyline that was built up in Kenny X-Men that got spilled out titles, per se. But after Divided We Stand, there was Manifest Destiny, which was the X-Men relocated to San Francisco, which they were based out of this place called Greymoor Industries until the events of Dark Reign. Of course, Wolverine himself basically... Yeah, so after the events of Secret Invasion, we had basically about a year and a half storyline that was concluded in early 2010. Basically, it wasn't necessarily a crossover per se. It was just a major storyline that tied in with a lot of the books at Marvel Comics at that point. A storyline known as The Dark Reign, where the villains took over and the Nomadons were the main villain of the storyline. And we also launched the fourth Avengers title this period of time. This title being Dark Avengers, which all the issues except for 2 written by Brian Michael Bendis, because 2 of the issues were written by Matt Fraction as part of a crossover with the Kenny X-Men known as Utopia, which that set up the events of the next storyline for Kenny X-Men called Nation X. Spider-Man is still doing his own thing, per se. Just Peter Parker stuff. Surprisingly, from One More Day up until around 2010, this period of time, the book wasn't terrible per se. It just, there were some good storylines, but not all of it was good. In the case of Advents of, and during the Court of Darkness, this was of course in 2009, Iron Man first did a storyline known as Seven Nightmares, and then began a year-long storyline known as World Most Wanted, where, because it's kind of hints at maybe during the Shield era, but really more developed more during the manufacture of the book, where it was during the book, it was revealed that there was sexual tension between Maria Hill and Tony Stark, which resulted in these two having sex. And then he later had sex with Pepper Potts, which resulted in not much of anything per se. Not really, no. Also, he was unavailable from Norman Osborn for this period of time. In the case of Thor, he just continued doing his own thing until the events of Siege. Captain America would do his own thing in this epic, critically acclaimed Brubaker stuff. Let's see. Punisher got relaunched under Rick Remender, which lasted for a good about 21 issues. Yeah, and the first storyline he basically dealt with was going after, trying to hunt Norman Osborn, and then get involved with the Hood, which resulted in the death of they also put several villains killed by the wacky character known as Scourge the Underworld, and then some get killed off. It was a really interesting book, per se. I recommend checking it out because Recommender did an excellent job writing The Punisher. And keep in this book lasted for 21 issues. Yeah, the book was retitled The Freaking Castle after issue 16, but still a damn good title. Oh, and the reason why he became Freaking Castle? Because Doc can slice into pieces. Yes, also the Wolverine title, because the whole Dark Reign, so I had to change everything. Wolverine was later retitled to Dark Wolverine, which lasted for 16 issues before the book got relaunched as Doc and Dark Wolverine. And that lasted for a good 22 issues, I believe it was. Originally by Daniel Way, and then the rest of the book is by Margaret Bennett. Let's see. I'm trying to think what else. Wolverine still had his own solo book. He still had Wolverine Origins, despite the fact he didn't have his main solo book because his son took over the title. Ares got a mini-series. Let's see. Deadpool just do whenever he wants in his own solo book. Let's see. In the case of what the Avengers were up to, mostly they would just deal with stuff related for fighting. Well, the big thing with this period of time is Hawkeye did join the Avengers. Well, the New Avengers, just prior to this, it became Ronin. As the reason why it became Ronin, well, also he decided to publicly go on camera and denounce. Well, he denounced publicly. He hated the fact that Bullseye, because basically Dark Avengers, which were led by Norman Osborn, he was referred to as Iron Patriot. Moonstone became Miss Marvel, despite the fact there was Miss Marvel. As a matter of fact, in the Miss Marvel title, Carol Danvers briefly died, and then Moonstone took over the title briefly for a story arc, and then she came back. Excuse me. Also in 2009, 4 ongoing series of Marvel Comics hit issue 600 that particular year. Amazing Spider-Man, Captain America, Thor, and The Incredible Hulk, all issue 600 the very same year. In Captain America 600, it revealed Cap was actually alive. And then after the next issue, the book went hiatus for 6 months to basically put out Captain America Reborn. A really good miniseries, by the way. Also by Brubaker as well. Me. Which ended with Cap coming back to present day, and, well, him named Bucky as the, well, this related leading to the events of Siege, by the way. Let's see. The Moon Knight title in 2009 actually ended, was relaunched as Vengeance of Moon Knight, which lasted for a whopping 10 issues before ending. Let's see. Thunderbolts will continue to do its own thing, per se. Let's see. I remember correctly during the whole Dark Reign stuff, because originally, like, when Norman Osborn was in charge of the group, they were headquartered at Thunderbolt Mountain. Then Dark Reign happened when they were headquartered at the Cube, which was a suit villain prison. Which they remained there up until Advents of Siege. Also, I think it was in 2008, they brought back the New Mutants title. First time been ongoing since 2003, which I wasn't reading the particular period of time, but that second volume, the third volume, I did read. It was amazing. I have a new channel, by the way. Check it out. Oh, a little fun fact. First of only 2 times ever in the history of the X-Men comics that we had a New Mutants and an X-Force title published the same period of time. The reason being because New Mutants Volume 1 was ended and relaunched as X-Force. Yeah, that was pretty much the next thing that happened would actually be during the Krakoa era. Yes. So, 2009, in my opinion, was a good year. It was not a year full of crossovers, but it did have a couple notorious things. One was the controversial Ultimatum, which resulted in the death of most of the Ultimate Universe, which a lot of people will still declare dead even afterward, despite it was still published for another 6 years before finally concluding. Also, I heard about this recently. There was this editor who decided to infiltrate Marvel Comics and become the power player behind the scenes. A woman by the name of Shandil Ahmed, who changed things better in Marvel Comics, but the company was still fine. It looks like basic changes she made did not take effect until 2013. Or at least like 20 until 2013 mostly. Also, I think it was 2009. X-Men did have one brief crossover that was I think it was Messiah Complex. It was a cross between Cable and X-Force. Yes. There was a very brief crossover known as Messiah War. Yeah, that happened in 2009. It was part of a major storyline. It was a follow-up to Messiah Complex, mostly. But it was a damn good storyline. Yeah. So, let's see. Amazing Spider-Man had the Red Sun thing, which had, well, the big thing with this storyline was he had Harry Osborn becoming American Son. And yeah, that was the big thing about that one, for that tie-in. But then 2010 hit. A damn good year for comics. Or for Marvel Comics, mostly. So, we started off that very year. Well, in the case of the X-Men comics, they finished up the storyline Nation X, which was on that very year. By the way, Simon Spurrier, he wrote, I think he wrote one of the books, per se. What book did he write here? For X-Men, he wrote... He was a co-writer for... I think it was Wolverine, I think it was. Yeah. Also, Mad Fraction, he was the writer of Punisher or Joe Fucker relaunched. Yeah. So, basically, we also had the really good storyline happen toward the end of 2009 for X-Men, known as Neurosha. Narosha, I have pointed this out though about this storyline. This was Marvel's counterpart to Blackest Night, which was a bunch of dead X-Men characters come up because of a virus. And at the conclusion of the storyline, Selene, the former Black Queen Hellfire Club, got killed by Thunderbird. But this later led to the next big storyline, Second Coming, which brought back... Now, there was a baby, which is later named in Cable's book, which is by Dwayne Straczynski, named Hope. And she became the focal point of Second Coming. And this was an epic storyline that spread out throughout the X books. Oh, in the case of Narosha, New Mutants basically heavily tied to an X-Force, but X-Men Legacy did its own thing by taking Team X-Men to go straight to Scotland, Muir Island. What it did was return of Proteus, which first time we've seen him since the 1980s, which resulted in Magneto shoving in outer space. But in the case of Second Coming, it was an epic storyline that involved the X-Men fighting a bunch of characters who have been dead. Fighting people like, believe it or not, Jason Strucker, Stephen Lang, Bolivar Trask, who his involvement with the storyline was a part of a tie-in to the thing, not part of the main story, because the main story was X-Men, Uncanny, it was X-Men Legacy, Uncanny X-Men, X-Force, and New Mutants. I believe it was. Am I correct about that? Yeah, New Mutants, Uncanny X-Force, X-Men Legacy. Now, the final issue of Cable did lead into this thing. But this basically, this storyline was really good. I love the writing, the artwork for this storyline. It was epic. Yeah, and the main villain of the story was old villain Bastion. Yes, an old Scott Lobdell character. Which I would recommend, if you're going to read the storyline, you got to have read Messiah Complex, Messiah War, Utopia, Nations. You got to read a lot of storylines to get this one. Oh, yes, you got to go through a lot. So, you got to first start with Nature Species, which was basically a backup storyline. Then read Messiah Complex, Divide We Stand, Manifest Destiny, Messiah War, Utopia, Nation X Rosa, Second Coming. Yeah, this crossover built up over the course of 3 years for X-Men comics. In the case of the outside of this, we actually had the event Siege. Unlike previous events, which were 8 issues, this is only 4. Though for some weird reason, the last issue was delayed by a month. Not really sure exactly why, but this story was the culmination of what Dark Reign was setting up. It was basically Norman Osborn and his organization, which plays S.H.I.E.L.D., Hammer, attacking Asgard in this big, epic crossover. But here's the thing. I think Marvel must learn a lesson from Dark Reign and Secret Invasion. Let's not have a lot of tie-ins to this thing. Like, now that ongoing series, you just basically had New Avengers, Dark Avengers, Mighty Avengers, Avengers Initiative, Thunderbolts, Dark Wolverine, and New Mutants. Yes, they had a crossover. It's like very brief, but in the end of this particular crossover, basically all the Avengers titles pretty much were all concluded, though New Avengers was relaunched under Bendis in that particular year. Hey. Oh, by the way, also, I forgot to mention, 05, we debuted the Avengers Tower, which was the prior base New Avengers for about 2 years, and then My Avengers to go from 07 to basically 09, and then from 09 to 2010 was Dark Avengers, and then from 2010 to about 2012, it was the primary base of the main Team Avengers, which reformed, because Marvel brought back the main Avengers title first time since 2004, still by America Bendis, and also there was at least 2 brand new original titles. The Mighty Avengers title ended in 2010. It was replaced with Secret Avengers. This was titled written by Ed Brubaker, which Brubaker at this point was writing 3 series that year. He wrote Secret Avengers, he wrote Captain America, obviously, and Steve Rogers Super Soldier. Really good books. The big things happened with the end of Siege was that Loki died. The original one Jack Kirby and Stan Lee created. The one that appears now is a different version of the character. They also killed off Ares, and they also killed off the Sentry. Excuse me. So, this later started the Heroic Age, which was really good. Also, Spider-Man started a really good storyline in 2010. A storyline known as The Gauntlet, which is simply a storyline built up to another storyline known as Grim Hunt, which is starting to take on people like Morbius, Electro, no Dr. Octopus. They basically started this in 600 with Dr. Octopus Return. Oh, now he has 8 arms, like an octopus. And it was like various villains they would fight throughout this whole storyline. Now, of course, they would also, prior to this, debut a new Vulture, who I refer to as Red Vulture because he never wore green, because the first 3 Vultures all wore green. This guy got killed off at the pages of Punisher by Greg Rucka. He was a cannibal, too. Yeah. So, after the Gauntlets were nearly dying, it was thanks to the storyline that they destroyed the original Daily Bugle building that debuted back in the 60s. It was destroyed by Electro. And then after this storyline, after that first story Electro, Daniel Bennett was basically dropped from Amazing Spider-Man because he was probably not a very popular character. And then off panel, his stock was bought up by... Well, apparently they had this thing in 2009 where there was this public bailout of a lot of corporations. And he got his hands on that bailout money, and apparently he published a story that Electro wasn't happy with, so he wanted that money, and he gave it to him. And Daniel Bennett disappeared. He was mentioned once after that, where Jameson bought back the stock because prior to this he became mayor of New York City for a few years until he resigned in 2013. Yeah. So, this led to Grim Hunt, which brought back Kraven the Hunter. But sadly it briefly brought back the Grim Hunter as his lion creature, which he got killed off in the storyline. They also killed off Kraven's wife, Sasha. And some of the storyline was later concluded in Spider-Girl, which was Arena. And also they killed off Madam Web. And you have Jessica Drew Julia Carpenter becoming the new Spider Madam Web. Jessica Drew as Spider. She had a brief miniseries in 2007, and then she got in their ongoing few years after this. It was in 2015 by a different writer. So, also in 2010, we have events like Shadowland, which I really enjoy this story. Chaos War. Also part of this, Hercules. He had his own book because he took over the distribution number for Incredible Hulk. The book became Incredible Hercules. Got concluded in 2010. With issue 141. Was there continued as Prince of Power. And then he later got the Chaos War and Herc book in 2011. Let's see. Well, they ended Avengers Moon Knight that year, and Moon Knight would have their book published the very next year by Bendis. And I think it wasn't David Finch, it was Alex Maleev who did the book. Let's see. The Daredevil book ended, the Triple H number ending in 2010, was relaunched the following year. Let's see. Let me think here. Excuse me. Trying to think what else. Did I miss anything? Oh yeah, X-Men later fought some. They started showing fought vampires for a year in their comics. Yes, vampires. Yeah, they also launched a second company to launch a new X-Men title. Just a third X-Men title. They launched that for a year in 2010. X-Force was relaunched as Uncanny X-Force by, I think it was Recommender who wrote the book. Yeah, Recommender wrote the book. They did briefly have a Sword title published in, I think it was '09, I think it was. Actually, it was 2010 they launched the book. It was very brief. But I wasn't a big fan of the artwork per se. Also, Namor got involved with the X books. He briefly got a solo title known as Namor the First Mutant, which lasted for 11 issues before concluding. Let's see. Also in 2010, this was also the end of the 3 times a month thing, and Dan Slott became the full-time writer for Amazing Spider-Man, which lasts until 2018. And he would begin some really good storylines in 2010. Storylines like Big Time. Like also with the Spider Slayers. A lot of really good storylines in 2010 for him. Oh yeah, definitely. Basically, after Grim Hunt, there was a storyline known as, well, of course, it was Big Time, but there was Origin of the Species, which was really good. But before that, there was a basically a very dumb sequel to One More Day, known as One Moment in Time. For some weird reason, Marvel decided to put this out during Dan Slott's run. This was the best way to describe One Moment at a Time. I've heard people describe this. I was not happy with the storyline. It was a middle finger to people begging Marvel Comics, please undo One More Day because of how really bad it is. And this storyline was a middle finger to that. This was the only thing really bad for Spider-Man that very year. But that's the only thing really negative about 2010. But then after this, then it was Big Time. Yeah, which lasted until the very next year. Yeah. Trying to see here, was there any other like besides Siege? Oh yeah, there was also Fall of the Hulks. Oh, there was also Roman Kings, obviously. World War Hulks, Thanos the Imperative, Shadowland, Chaos War. A lot of really good storylines that very year. So, One Moment at a Time is nothing negative about 2010. Well, but aside from that, 2010 was a damn good year when it comes to comics. Oh yeah, definitely. '09, on the surface, nothing bad about that year. '08, nothing bad about that year either. Just one negative thing about 2010. But that's pretty much it for this particular video here. So, please be sure to like, comment, subscribe, turn notifications. So, next up, I thought I had time to start watching that brand new anime, but I'm going to have to save it for tomorrow. Which, I got plenty of time tomorrow anyway, because I have no new anime tomorrow. Hooray! So, see you next video. Bye.